Scripture is from the book of Jeremiah. My joy is gone, grief is upon me, my heart is sick. Listen, the cry of the daughter of my people is far and wide in the land. Is the Lord not in Zion? Is her king not in her? Why have they provoked me to anger with their images, with their foreign idols? The harvest is past, the summer is ended, and we are not saved. For the brokenness of the daughter of my people, I am broken. I mourn, and horror has seized me. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no physician there? Why then has the health of the daughter of my people not been restored? Oh, that my head were a spring of water, and my eyes a fountain of tears, so that I might weep day and night for the slain of the daughter of my people.
Jeremiah this morning. Is there no balm in Gideon? Jeremiah is crying. I love music. Just love music. And the church that I had retired from pre-pandemic, I just retired December, pre-pandemic, we had started a jazz service, jazz and blues service, which by the time I left was outnumbering and outpolling and outdoing everything with the traditional services, such all sorts of dynamics in a church. You know, I mean, we weren't, that service wasn't real music. I love it. So I read this text and that got me singing. And I was thinking about songs of tears, you know. So I'm gonna, remember, it's my Leslie Gore, it's my party and I'll cry if I want to, cry if I want to, cry if I want to. You would have too if it happened to you. Remember that? And then the same album, it ends in that album with just Judy's Turn to Cry. Remember that one? If you remember the first one, it's my party. Leslie's having a party, and Judy's there, and boyfriend John is there, and Judy and John go out for a walk, and what happens? They come back, and Judy's wearing John's ring. Huh. The problems of teenagehood. And so Judy's turn to cry, the Leslie character, goes out and dances with someone else, and John decks him, and Judy gets the ring back. Great story. But we fall in love with as teenagers, right? But then there's Big Girls Don't Cry. Big Girls Don't Cry. Yeah, you're up there. Go ahead. Big Girls Don't Cry. That comes from, actually that line comes from the movie Tennessee Partner, where Rhonda Fleming gets unfortunately hit. Somebody asks her if it hurts, and she says, "Big girls don't cry." And Bob Kroll remembers that line, and wakes up the next day and writes that song. But then you get into real music about crying. Janis Joplin. Cry, cry, cry. You don't remember Janis Joplin. Too young to remember Janis Joplin. But you can remember Janis Joplin. And then you get Ella when she sings Cry Me a River. Oh, so now we're getting there a bit, right? Cry Me a River. And if you want to hear somebody do that, listen to Crawl do that. And she has a great piano piece in it. But then you get to Ella James. The sky is crying. Can't you see the tears roll down the street? Remember that one? The sky is crying. Can't you see the tears roll down the street? Can't you see my baby? And I wonder where she be. And of course, there's always raindrops or so there's a progression here, you see, from as we get older, from the pops to the blues. But you know, you really can't hear the blues, I think, until you've suffered the blues, until you've suffered real loss. So in the text this morning, someone is crying the blues. He is suffering. Let's talk a moment about crying, about tears. Because everyone cries, unless you have a medical condition that blocks your tear ducts. And then you got a real problem, because you need to clean your eyes. That's what tears do in a lot of ways. We all cry. As a kid, you skinned your knees, you fell off your bike, your mom picked you up, or your dad made it all better, kissed it, it all went away. We get older, we skin our knees, right? Who picks you up, kisses it, makes it feel a little better, a little harder, isn't it? And sometimes we just laugh so hard, we cry. Anybody ever laugh so hard they cry? Yeah? That's always a fun thing, but we're not talking about that, are we? Let's face it, tears are linked to sorrow, especially as we age and we cry. So I guess the title of this is, Big Don't Cry. Big fill in the blank. Big girls don't cry. Big boys don't cry. Who suffers more? There's a lot of tearful weeping and wailing in the text, a lot of blues. So we start with the interesting psychological response known as crying. One website says several factors, and I'm quoting, play a role in the individual's propensity to cry. Now I could argue, and I would argue, is it nature or nurture crying? Is it nurture that gets us to cry, or is it nature, or what controls that? Gender differences in crying, for example, have been explored for decades. And across the world, and all the studies reached the same conclusion. And I know I'm supposed to believe in science, but I have a problem with the conclusion. It says women cry more than men. Big girls don't cry. Big boys don't cry. I'm not sure if I buy into that study sometimes. Maybe, but why? In 1980, biochemist William Fry, PhD, found that women cry at an average of 5.3 times a month, while men cry at an average of 1.3 times a month. I have no idea where they got that stuff. I'm just quoting the science. When crying is defined as anything from moist eyes to full-on sobbing. Well, I cry just about anything nowadays, so. Biologically, there may be a reason why women cry more than men, and testosterone may be an inhibitor to crying, because we're tough men. While the hormone prolactin is seen in higher levels in women, may promote it. And I have a problem buying into that. I'm part of a men's group. We've been together, most of us, for over 30 years. The same guys. Some of us have passed on, we've added a few. But I gotta tell you, men cry. Men cry. And often. Maybe it's because we get older, our teeth count drops, I don't know. But it just seems we just do. We have held hands with each other after one of us has lost a partner, a life partner, and we cried. We've been together when we watched one of us have lost a child, and we cried. I did a committal service recently for a woman who was 92 and passed away. Her son spoke. He's in his 70s. Yeah, he didn't get past the first sentence. So the jury's out on who's speaking here. Is it the prophet or is it God? Commentators go back and forth. Maybe it doesn't matter. But the speaker is having a good cry here. Perhaps it's cathartic. The question is there no balm in Gilead? Suggests that there is indeed such a healing ointment somewhere, and thus there is a ray of hope. But in Gilead, apparently no physician can be found this morning. How far can I wander? You ever called 911? Anybody here ever called 911? Ever hear not? 911, right? The operators will tell you they get all sorts of calls. Some very kind, very calm. Hi, this is Bob. My wife just fell down 14 flights of stairs and I think I need an ambulance. Other times they just cry in a panic, just sobbing on the phone. One woman told me she cried, called 911, her husband had a heart attack, and she was just crying. She said, I couldn't do anything. The operator was telling me you need to start CPR, and she said, I can just hold him and cry. Don't leave me now. We vacationed at a place called Chautauqua. I don't know if anybody knows Chautauqua. There you go. It's an institution that's centered in arts, religion, culture. We bring leaders from various fields to give lectures. It's a phenomenal place. We've been going there for over 40 years. Every year, we just love it. I am now what they call a dialogue facilitator on the ground, which is a fancy term. We don't get paid a thing, but we have little badges make us feel important. And our job is, after a series of lectures, we get folks together to talk about what was the main theme, and we facilitate these and keep everybody on a pleasant course. We had Jamie Reskin was there from the committee on the January 6th committee. We had him there for 2 days, and he talked about the loss of his son. What a powerful time to be with him. But I was also there this year for the moment when Salman Rushdie was attacked in the attempted assassination. There was 4,000 of us there. And we asked afterwards, well, as facilitators, do we meet with our groups? Because the lecture didn't happen. But in the end, we did. Small groups of people crying, hurt, tears. A woman confided in me a day later that she was having nightmares. She said in her 80 years of life that she had never witnessed violence. First time she ever witnessed violence. She said she could hear the repeated thuds in her sleep at night. Is there no bomb? Is there no bomb? Years ago, my wife and I were witnesses to a head-on collision. Cars right in front of us. I pulled my car over and told our young boys not to get out under any circumstances, and we both ran to assist. In a strange twist of nature, we knew victims in both cars. I was working with Archie in one of the cars, trying to stop him from bleeding out. And he looked up at me and he said, Ed, you need to secure my gun in my briefcase. I said, you've got a gun? He and I were co-soccer team coaches, but I found out later he was actually an undercover agent. I said, I didn't know he had a gun. I had never touched a gun in my life. I looked over at my wife and she was doing CPR on our church's eldest deacon. His wife suddenly showed up and I can hear her screaming to this day, how did this happen? How did this happen? And the tears and the wailing coming from someplace inside of her. And I just heard. There were moments there is no balm. I'm a pastoral counselor, and folks will enter my space and sit and start to talk, and suddenly, like a river breaking, tears flow down the street, as if they've been given permission. Is there no balm? I ask myself. Bottom line, we all sooner or later find ourselves somewhere in a grief cycle, and we experience grief. The prophet Jeremiah is calling for a doctor. He doesn't need a doctor. He needs a professional counselor. He needs an LPC like me. He needs more than a doctor. It's not that someone near him is having a medical crisis. It's deeper than that. The patient is not even a person. It's a whole nation. His whole nation of Judah. We can imagine, we can hear Jeremiah weeping, crying for help. His heart is breaking. All hell is breaking loose around him. The people are reverting to previous bad, dysfunctional behavior. They're worshiping foreign gods and falling into a manner of immorality. It's a cycle we all know too well, don't we? We get bad, we say something we shouldn't say. We work at it, we promise we'll change. We try to change a little bit. It gets good again. Somebody shows up with flowers. And then we go off the wagon again. And we say that word again, and we do that thing again, and that behavior happens again. And the cycle comes all the way around again. It's a no bomb, idiot. He cries out. Nations go wrong. Right? Nations make mistakes. And then there's a time of reconciliation and then grief. Britain has lost her queen. And there's mourning, but we're not talking about that, are we, this morning? Because that's appropriate sorrow. We're talking about wholesale grief, the anguish that tears at the soul. Parents this morning in the Ukraine, bodies being taken out of the earth with hands tied behind them. We're talking about another kind of grief this morning. We can heal them like Rachel, like in the Bible in Luke for 2,000, all those babies that were crying, where there is no way she can be comforted. Bodies recovered from unmarked graves. So when Jeremiah asks, is there no balm in Gilead, he's referring to a resin harvested from balsam pine trees that grew in the region. A fragmented oil refined from the pine sap was good for all kinds of ailments. You could say it was the Vicks Vapor Rub of the day. Now, how many remember Vicks Vapor Rub, right? Yeah. Your mother slathered it on you. They'd probably put a t-shirt on over it to make you sweat, you know, and it burned your nostrils. This was a healing ointment of the day. That goo. That I still can remember that aroma. Supposedly it would make us breathe again. And supposedly it cured whatever ailment you had. Sometimes. Did not cure all ailments. I remember my aunt had leukemia. There was no Vicks for that. I remember saying to my dad and my granddad, I was just a little kid, they were both pharmacists. Do something. Can't you bring some Vicks? Sometimes they need something more. Jeremiah cries out, is there no balm, no medicine that can help? Is there nothing, no one who can bring healing to this failed, ailing people? And he moves from prophet to pastor here, because he was a prophet. And now he moves to pastor in his thinking. Now, we all know that. You know, 5 years ago, I remember standing in the pulpit, and I'm sure your pastors did too, saying, you know, every 500 years, there's a huge shakeup in the church. And we prophesied that the church was going to go through a huge change. I remember doing that. I did not know there'd be a pandemic. And I did not know the church would be stripped of so many of its members. But we all had to move from prophesizing that because we knew it, we saw it coming, I knew it was coming, I felt the change coming. And the pulpit that I stood in, I then ended up having to move to pastor congregations that had lost so much. So much. The people who are sick and the pharmacy shelves this morning are bare for Jeremiah. The great missionary Albert Schweitzer took a medical image from his own African practice and applied it to European culture of his birth. And he said, you know of the disease in Central Africa called sleeping sickness. There's also exists a sleeping sickness of the soul. Its more dangerous aspect is that one is unaware of its coming. That is why you have to be careful. As soon as you notice the slightest signs of indifference, the moment you become aware of the loss of certain seriousness, of longing, of enthusiasm and zeal, take it as a warning. You should realize your soul suffers if you live superficially. I think we could say that again today. We could say that again today. Sin is not without its consequences. Sin infects the soul of those who believe they can take a vacation from morality for a few days. Sort of hop on a plane and I'm just going to forget ethics and morals for a few days and take a weekend off. You can't do that. They bring you contagious back home with them. You're perfectly accurate. Sin never originates externally because the seeds of immorality behavior are already planted in our hearts long before they get to the baggage claim. Jeremiah's whole point is that sin is not just a collection of disconnected, immoral behaviors. He never pretends that the solution to sin is just exercise a little willpower. Just say no. Thank you, Nancy Reagan, but we need more than that. Just say no is no answer. Jeremiah is a realist. He knows sin runs deep. It needs to be healed. Is there no balm in Gilead? Is there no one to apply the miracle cure so spiritual health and wholeness can be restored? There is, in fact, such a cure. I wear these robes and believe there's a cure. We know in the Christian tradition as the grace of God found in Jesus Christ. The African slaves of the American South knew it better than we. Held captive and oppressed in all their days, laboring under the lash of overseers, they were yet allowed to sing spiritual songs as they worked. They too had the blues, just as Jeremiah had the blues. One of them is the beloved hymn we're going to close with, based on this very passage from Jeremiah. They answered the question, is there a balm in Gilead? With the hymn they say, there is a balm of Gilead. The hymn attempts to answer the prophetic cry. So that's a powerful medicine, isn't it? The slaves who sang that hymn had tears, weeping as they sang the precious remedy from far off Gilead. They sang the blues because they lived the blues. So you have to be around long enough. I always say in churches, if you really want to find people who have lived life, when you get back to meeting house, find those people that sit in that pew, those older folks. They've lived life. They understand life. That's where wisdom is, and that's where the blues is. Because they know what life is all about. The tears we cry then are water, mostly water. Water is the life principal ingredients of human tears, of our bodies. When we are profoundly moved, our bodies supply water that runs down our cheeks. And I said the jury is out of who is speaking this text. Some commentators say it's Jeremiah. Others say it's God. I like to think it's God that's speaking in this text this morning. Because when I'm broken to tears, the comfort I get in this text, or for me personally, or when a client sits across from me sobbing over the crisis that has driven him or her to grief. Maybe I've come to believe that the whole Godhead is crying with me that morning, crying with her or him that morning. That the whole Trinity has come together and cries and sobs with us. that we are never alone in our grief, but that God is not out there somewhere, but right there, touching our soul, being with us, praying with us, crying with us, sharing tears with us. That is the good news that I get, that I'm never alone. Yes, in the end, that's where I find and offer comfort, that I'm never alone. My clients are never alone. My congregation is never alone. That God suffers and cries and sobs, and God wails right there besides me and within me. So, my friends, it's okay to cry, to be vulnerable over opportunities lost, foolish rebellions and pettiness, remorse for chasing after false gods, or bitterness, because we never cry alone. Because there is a balm in Gideon, a balm of grace, a balm of the soul. The only things in this weird world that can cure a sin-sick soul, the grace of our Jesus Christ.